ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Los Angeles City Council's Committee on Homelessness and Poverty. I'm joined by Council members Huizar and Bonin. We have about a half dozen agenda items today, but we'll begin our meeting, as we begin all meetings, with folks who have submitted public comment cards. Mr. Spindler, Mr. Herman, you've been warned already, so let the record show that your first warning has been issued. And we will begin our multiple public comment cards with Patricia McAllister, Nicholas Previsic, and John Motter.
Okay, just a total 2 minutes.
Total
okay.
2 minutes, yes, sir.
So I'm concerned about this HHH. You have a committee, the Proposition HHH Administrative Oversight Committee meeting. They met 2 times last year. They canceled 10 times. These are the people that we're supposed to be. They're supposed to be reporting to us about how they're doing on building this housing. So please look into that, Council Member Harris. Thank you. Now, here's the deal. Number one, I read the motion of the resolution. At least 225,237 people are sleeping on the street at night. And number 2, you said the motion says you must update the current minimum health and safety standards established to combat the current homelessness. Now, we've been talking about this for 3-4 years. I think number 3 is a good idea. I think this El Pablo, we need more of those. So we got illegal aliens coming here talking about they don't want it. They shouldn't even be in this country. They're living in our affordable housing. Number 4, that motion, you say here that we have more than 34,000 people sleeping on the street or homeless, somewhere homeless. So I think number 4 is a good idea. Number 5, I'd like to hear what the city attorney is going to tell us about these programs. I'm disappointed in the city attorney's office. We have 550 attorneys on staff and 250 off-site. The budget is almost in the billions of dollars. The White House don't have this. You know, we got to let these blood-sucking lawyers get off of our payroll. We could be using that money for affordable housing. They're sitting back writing a paragraph. I used to work for law firms, so I know what they do. Paralegals do most of the work. We need to cut that city attorney's office down to at least half, 250. It's a shame. I look at their budget. I have a copy of the budget. So let's think about that. But I want to hear what they have to say today. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I want to speak. I'm John Motter. I'm with Ground Game Los Angeles and Democratic Socialists of America Los Angeles, and I want to speak in support of items numbers 1, 2, and 3. And to everyone here who came to speak out against any building of emergency shelters or beds in their neighborhood because you're terrified of having to live next to these people, I'm going to remind everyone that Los Angeles is the nation's capital of homeless veterans. Over 5,000 veterans sleep on the street every night. So if you're going to say you're terrified of veterans, you don't want a vet living next to you, I don't want to see none of y'all complaining next time someone takes a knee during a game. I don't want to see none of y'all getting a discount mattress on Memorial Day. I want to see you saying shit about my brothers and sisters sleeping on the street. Second, I came and I spoke out against the criminalization of homelessness at the LA Police Commission yesterday. A lot of fine words were spoken by Dominic Choi and Charlie Beck about how we're not targeting the homeless. I got here a video. This is just this morning on Skid Row. This is 10 LAPD officers dragging what looks like a 100-pound black woman out of her tent, bound her legs, threw her into a black and white for what looks like, as near as we can tell from investigating the neighbors and the business, there's a 5611 violation. They said they had warned her. We're guessing her tent was 5 feet away from this driveway of the business instead of 10 feet. So that necessitated the use of 10 police officers to treat her like a fucking pig, bound her legs, cuffed her, and drug her into a squad car. So this is even the first thing I've seen this week. I've seen sanitation teams destroy my neighbor Sunshine. She lives on the street. She's a 60-year-old lady, like sweetest woman you ever met. Just wants to take care of her cat. Second time in 2 weeks, a Hope team came, destroyed our belongings. First time they came through, destroyed her identification, destroyed her documents she needs for Social Security benefits, destroyed her tent. This time they took everything else, so congratulations, you're winning.
Hello, my name is Nicholas Prevasic. I am a veteran of the Persian Gulf War, and I am the president of the El Dorado and Spring Homeowners Association. In the 1 March editorial in the LA Times concerning homelessness, there's a picture of this man. He is in fact not homeless. He is a resident, the man who was collapsed in the Walker, is a resident of the Alexandria SRO. He's a chronic alcoholic. He's been arrested at least twice for masturbating in public in front of my unit. And he undergoes numerous trips to the emergency room every year at the cost of obviously hundreds of thousands of dollars, lots of police attention. He does not need housing. He needs inpatient mental health care and addiction therapy. Honestly, you can build 100,000 units a month, and this will do nothing for these hundreds of thousands of people. We have to get real about that problem and address it. The laws must be changed. We must address it now. We have a humanitarian disaster in progress. It's not going to end, no matter what you build. And that was with respect to item 1. Item 2, I do applaud this recent initiative of Councilman Huizar. However, I am concerned that it will be framed as a strictly CD14 DTLA problem. Frankly, downtown LA has done more than its share. I have 3 SROs within 1 block of my residence. I am not a NIMBY, clearly. I live here. But I am an enough-bee. We have had enough. Every CD must step up and do their share. I would suggest in parallel with your 222 unit initiative to have 222 shelters per CD as a goal. I would strongly urge you to make that your goal today. And just in conclusion, I hate to state the obvious, but we have 4th world conditions in 3rd world in Skid Row. The place has its own tuberculosis strain, for God's sake. This is the 2nd largest city in the wealthiest country in the history of this planet. And we have this squalor, this pestilence, this horror. Our most vulnerable citizens who cannot take care of themselves by virtue of their rights starve and die in the streets like animals. This must end. Thank you. Oh, and decentralize it. That's the only way to do it.
Thank you. I have Ms. McButts. There's no Ms. McButts. All right. I have 3 cards that have expletives on it that I'm not going to repeat. Bill Watkins.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Bill Watkins, formerly homeless, with a college degree, and trying to clean sidewalks and impress people enough to make that something the city pays for. I want to add something right now to the public record for this meeting, a petition to work. I have 70 names of homeless people ready to work today, ready to work now as pedestrian cleaners. I was going for 1,000, but I found out the sidewalks are unsafe. I told the general counsel earlier this morning in Skid Row it's unsafe to do the type of work I was doing. So I skedaddled, and now I'm asking, well, can I add this? So I'll add that petition when you get a chance. Can I speak on 3, I guess, is why I'm here, 3 in public comment. So I appreciate Mr. Huizar, Mr. Bonin, and their heart and trying to help with this problem. I've been concerned as a history person. My father was a history person. I'm a history person. And you look down at Alvera Street, and it's a historical region, and it hurts to think that we'll have tents or some big homeless thing down there. Emergencies are emergencies, though. Governments have to take care of emergencies. So I appreciate your heart on the issue. What I hope the petition does, and ideas like day labor stations, and the fact that homeless want to work, some do. My tally was about 50% of the people I interviewed were ready to work that day, but their records and resumes don't make for big, fancy jobs, but they can hold a broom, get a bib, have a boss for a day, get paid $80, $85 for the day plus a free lunch. There's something there. So like the gentleman has said, the homeless don't just need housing. There's other stuff, and I hope we look at this job concept. And anyways, thanks for your heart and good luck.
Thank you.
Can I submit this?
All right, can we read item number 1 into the record for consideration?
I have multiple items coming.
So do I, sir. So do I. Herman?
Thank you.
I have 5.
Tell me your name.
Chen Perry?
Herman. So do I.
I'll be on the lookout for it. I don't see it now, but we'll get to the bottom of it. Thank you, Jed.
Yes, sir. Item number 1 is a resolution by Council Members Harris Dawson, Wesson, Wisar, et al. Relative to a pledge of support for a minimum of 222 new units of supportive housing funded by Proposition HHH for the period of July 1, 2017 to July 1, 2020 for a total of 3,330 citywide supportive housing units over the 3-year period.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll begin this with public comment, and Mr. Perriott, you are right. You submitted comment cards for multiple items, as did you, Liz Hirsch, Shanika Brown, and Marie Rumsey. So I'll invite all of you up for 2 minutes to speak on this item and the additional items that you spoke on. What's your name, sir?
I signed up as Shanika Brown, sir.
Hi there, Jed Perry with the Democratic Socialists of America. There's some encouraging things on this agenda. I have to commend you guys for obviously Triple H housing being committed to by every council district. Although I'm very disappointed that it's only 222. I don't know where that number came from. I don't know why you talk about being bold and taking action. Why don't you commit 714? That would cover the 10,000 units in Triple H. I'm not really sure why you're lowering the number there. That's a little bit concerning. And I really do commend this parking lot at El Pueblo. I think these need to be all over the city, and I think that this is a good first step. But again, in looking at all of this, it's really clear, as I've said many times here, that there's going to be thousands of people living in the street for a long time, and the sweeps I know are going to continue, and we're going to be out there watching. What I don't understand, and this pertains to agenda item number 5, citation enforcement. The city attorney, I hope, is going to be here to talk about that in person. I'd like for him to explain to me what a citation does for somebody who's unhoused right now, who has nowhere to go, doesn't want to go to a shelter. I know that the excuse would be, well, we need to clear right of way. There's public space, it's for everybody, and we got to get them to move. You're already doing that with sweeps. Every day there's sweeps pushing people out of the way, doing horrific things. Why also give them citations? And you get more than 2 of those, or 2 or more, you get a warrant out for your arrest? I've heard so many stories of people's lives getting ruined for these quality of life citations. They get scolded for not seeking help, and a lot of them are seeking help, and they're not getting it from LAHSA, which is what you're telling them all to do. There's not enough LAHSA workers really holding true to their word, and I would really like to hear an explanation. Because right now, I'm going to continue to demand, starting today, to put an immediate injunction on quality of life citations while there's this many people living in the street. Giving out tickets is so pointless. I don't understand.
Thank you. Mr. Spindler, this is your last warning. You are interrupting the public comment speakers. You're disrupting the meeting. Last time. Yes.
Hello, I'm Liz Hirsch. I'm a resident of Hollywood. I'm a parent and I'm a teacher. I'm also a member of Democratic Socialists of America. I believe housing is a human right. I want to say with regards to item 1 that I agree with Jed. I think the math on this item is really unsatisfactory. I think 222 minimum units per district should be quadrupled, make it 888, perhaps. I think that you may have this minority of obstructionist constituents that don't want the units built, that don't want the units built near them, but there's 60,000 people in need of homes right now. And further to item 5 and citation enforcement, I wanted to mention that I was listening to our mayor, Eric Garcetti, on KPCC yesterday, and I wanted to just share, for those who may not yet have heard him speaking yesterday or at any other time when he's given public comment on this, that he said he doesn't think ticketing is a solution. He said, literally verbatim, it should be the last thing we do, the very last thing we do. And I and others have witnessed these sweeps, and it's not the last thing. These tickets are not, it's not being approached that way by LAPD, by sanitation, by the parks. And arrests rose 10% in 2017. These citations don't do anything to end homelessness, only housing will. housing is a human right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Marie Rumsey, and I'm here on behalf of the Central City Association, and we're here to support item number 1. We are thankful that you're doing a resolution, each of you committing to 222 units in your district. We understand that this will yield more than 3,000 units over the next 3 years, and so that's in line with the goals of Proposition HHH. So we appreciate that and we support it. We're also here to support Councilmember Weezer and his efforts to bring interim housing to the El Pueblo site. We are very encouraged by that and think it's a step in the right direction, and we thank you for your leadership.
So I want to reach out to the city attorney, since I've been homeless since 2008, by design of this city's gross negligence and malice to humanity, meaning Americans, as brought up by the gentleman, the veterans, and Miss Sunshine, all we want is housing. And we all voted for HHH, we all voted for Measure H, and you still violate the so-called health and safety of 19955 government code. Why do you do this? Why do you jeopardize the lives of Americans over dollars and cents when you got $1.2 billion, you stupid motherfucker, Eric Garcetti? I'll show you how to delegate money. I'll show you how to get every person off the goddamn motherfucking street. Because I ain't no fucking skinhead. I ain't no fucking Jew. All I want is to make people happy to get off the fucking street. But I'm not going to live in a shelter, Miss City Attorney, when I saw you at the LA Police Commission and that motherfucking Jew, Steve Soboroff, and Englander have always thrown me out of public meetings because you don't want my public testimony. 42 U.S.C. 1983, fuck you white niggers for fucking up my city.
Get to the item.
The item is HHH, and we've been bitching about housing, and all you can come up with 222 new housing? Well, I'm an American, and the same veterans that sleep in the garage, the same veterans that sleep on the street are tired and fucking tired of dealing with you fucking assholes. That's what you really are, shitholes, corrupted politicians. Why are you taking money from San Pedro Port? Why don't you put the fucking money into housing and build, motherfucker?
That's your time. Frank Romero, Jessica Correa, Mark Valianatos.
Hi, my name is, to the committee, thank you for having us. My name is Frank Romero. I'm a Community Affairs Liaison at United Way of Greater Los Angeles. I'm a voter of the Proposition HHH and also a resident in CD14. And I'm here, along with the United Way, to support the resolution for the 222 pledge. In terms of numbers, I think there's a lot of numbers that go around to the general public. 57,000 people experiencing homelessness across the county, 34,000 in the city, $1.2 billion, 355 numbers, but what people could wrap their head around is 222 units, minimum units, that's going to be in each of the 15 districts for the next 3 years. That's going to get us to 3,330, which is going to meet our goal and actually exceed our goal of 10,000 units for Proposition HHH. I just want to say that we commend you. We thank you for your leadership. We want to keep on pushing through. But this is something that I think the general public could get behind. And if we go behind that number, I think the general public could apply pressure where pressure is needed. So we appreciate your leadership and thank you.
Thank you. These are 1 minute. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. Jessica Correa from the Corporation for Supportive Housing. CSH is a national nonprofit that believes high-quality supportive housing solutions need to be integrated into the way every Los Angeles Council district serves the men, women, and children in need. The 222 resolution ensures that some geographic equity will exist throughout the city of Los Angeles. And as you have heard previously from our CSH Speak Up advocates, those are individuals with lived experience. Homelessness does not pick and choose based on where you grew up, where you live now. We know supportive housing works best when it is located in communities that its residents want to live in and have close ties to. So no matter which council district you may represent, it is guaranteed that many of your residents and neighbors are one of the at least 34,000 currently homeless individuals living in the city. please support the passage of the 222 resolution onto the full City Council, and thank you so much for sponsoring this.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Valianatos, and I'm Policy Director of Abundant Housing LA, which is a volunteer pro-housing group with 1,500 members. We support more homes of all types in LA, but we particularly see the critical need for permanent supportive housing. And we're thrilled that you and your colleagues are moving forward the permanent supportive housing ordinance and the motel conversion ordinance. That's great work. And we support this commitment to put homes for the homeless in every council district in LA. I look forward to seeing more near me in Northeast Los Angeles. I would suggest a friendly amendment to this ordinance you might consider for accountability. In other words, what happens if 2 years go by and in some districts there are only 10 built or 30 built or 40 built? So maybe there'd be a trigger that if at the end of the period you haven't reached the 222, there'd be some kind of expediting, or you would lose your ability to do letters of determination for proposed projects. So in other words, think about how you ramp up accountability at the end of it. But this is a great ordinance. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I have an additional card with expletives on it that I will not repeat. So, yes, sir. No, for no minutes. I'm not saying the name. So, are there questions or comments on this? Gentle persons, item number 1.
Yeah.
Mr. Huizar?
Thank you very much, and I think it's great that we are moving forward with this, and we do need to decentralize from and build in areas that have historically not accepted permanent supportive housing. Our comprehensive strategic plan on homelessness calls for decentralization and for doing just what we're doing today. When our guidelines for HHH, some applications receive additional points should they be located in areas that have historically not accepted permanent supportive housing or homeless services. What is disturbing is that yesterday in our Plum Committee, we also heard the HCID report on the geographic distribution of permanent supportive housing and where they are. We know historically what's happened, and 55% of the city's completed permanent supportive housing projects and HHH allocations are in high segregation and poverty areas, primarily Central, East Side, South LA. But what we also see is those that are in the pipeline, the first applications, 67% of them continue to be in these areas. So we need to correct that. Although we've made it very clear on the strategic plan, we made it very clear on the guidelines on who gets more points for going to areas that not have historically accepted these types of projects. The pre-development shows that we continue to do that. So hopefully we correct that after these pre-development applications. I understand that there were some projects in the pipeline, and they now shifted to get HHH dollars, so that's understandable and acceptable, but hopefully we can correct it in the next round as well. But other than that, this is a good start, 222 every 3 years. After 3 cycles of this, over 10 years, we would have a better distribution around the city. So I think it's a great way to move forward, and I look forward to continuing to make sure that we decentralize from those areas that have historically had an over-concentration of permanent supportive housing and homeless services.
Thank you, Mr. Huizar. Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank my colleagues for their commitment and their leadership. This is an exciting challenge and one I think is totally doable. In fact, I was pleased to announce this morning that CD9 has committed to 295 units of housing. And we hope to certainly be past that, well past that by 2020. But the point is, everybody has a role to play, and we want to make sure that these projects are distributed throughout our city. But we have to show the leadership, and I'm proud to be a member of this committee that is setting the tone and setting the pace. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. I think that wraps up our comments. I have one instruction that I'll read into the record, that the Housing and Community Investment Department prepare an annual report summarizing the awards of Prop HH funds, including the number of PSH and affordable housing units funded each year, and aggregate the total over all funding years disaggregated by council district. If there is no objection, that'll be the order. And we'll move to item number 2.
Yes, sir. Item number 2 is an LA Department of Building Safety report relative to the proposed ordinance amending Section 91.8605 of Division 86, Article 1, Chapter 9 of the Los Angeles Municipal Code to clarify applicability of standards to include new and existing buildings or structures and add provisions to facilitate the establishment of temporary emergency shelters with provisions to ensure safety of occupants.
Thank you. We have Jerry Jones, public comment on this, and I think you have two other items, so we'll give 2 minutes so you can speak on everything.
I'll be brief. Jerry Jones, Inner City Law Center. I just wanted to commend the committee for prioritizing shelter. I think we've, in the same way that we've underinvested in long-term solutions, we've underinvested in emergency resources as well. And it's very dangerous out there for vulnerable individuals. And the absence of a shelter system also increases the hardship. A friend of mine who had been on the streets for years made the observation one time that, you don't get a handbook to explain how to be homeless when it happens to you. You've got to figure it out yourself, and you ask others who are on the streets what to do. And so that sense of disorientation is made even worse when there's not even shelters you can go to find a place to regroup. And so in short, I say thank you. There's a lot of folks out there with nowhere to go, and this will help.
Thank you. All right, I think we have a report from staff on this matter, building and safety. And our homeless are. Yes, okay. Let's do it.
Good afternoon, council members, Mr. Chair. We were directed by this committee to...
Pardon me, please keep your signs down because people behind you can't see. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Eugene Barbeau with the Department of Building and Safety. We were directed by this committee to report on code provisions for emergency homeless shelters. The report is part of the council file. Just real brief, there was original language enacted in 1980 for emergency shelter provisions. We recognized during this current homeless crisis that those provisions needed to be revised. We have since expanded those provisions to capture a larger variety of potential homeless shelters throughout the city. Those provisions have also been consolidated to expedite the permitting and construction process. And all this has been done while still maintaining the minimum health and safety standards as required by the state. Again, all this is presented in the report. That's part of the council file.
Excellent.
I'm Catherine Nuescagaba, Building and Safety. I'm here to support if you have any questions as well in regards to the ordinance.
All right.
Good afternoon, Meg Barclay, City Homeless Coordinator in the CAO's office. The report before you is the first step in upgrading and enhancing our existing emergency shelter declaration to go a little further than what we've been able to do in the past, thanks to new state legislation that went into effect in January of this year. So the first step would be to approve these alternate minimum health and safety standards for establishing new shelters in response to an emergency shelter declaration. The state has 30 days to review these requirements, so that's why we're here. Our existing declaration expires April 19th. And so once the state approves these, we will be back with the recommended ordinance to extend our emergency shelter declaration for another year, which with these additional provisions, this would allow us to expedite the establishment of new emergency shelters in other types of construction and also by right in more zones throughout the city. So it would streamline the process. This would apply at this point to publicly owned or leased property, but we may be able to come back with some additional or be able to provide additional information about how these could be applied on private property as well when we come back with the declaration in April.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Bonin?
Thank you. Thanks for your work on this. This is a step in the right direction. I'm glad the state legislature has given us the leeway for this. Let me start with where you just ended, Meg. about this only applying for publicly owned or leased facilities. What mechanism do we need to do, if you could explain a little bit more, to make this apply to privately owned as well?
I believe actually we already have a little more authority to be more permissive on private property, and so that's why we don't have to go to the state with that. Is that correct? I'm sorry, Gita could probably
Gita O'Neill
expand
from
on
the City
that.
Attorney's Office, and Adrian Corsani is here from Planning as well to speak on that.
Adrian Corsani, City Attorney's Office. So currently the city has two code sections that apply to emergency shelters that are developed pursuant to the declaration of a shelter crisis. 1280 pertains to city-owned properties, 1281 to private properties. The state only speaks to our ability to regulate on city-owned property. However, through the city's police powers, we've developed a process for privately owned properties. The way that the council approved the ordinance the last time allows building safety and fire to promulgate regulations to regulate those developments on private property. And with the ordinance that is going to be going to HCD, the state, if this committee recommends to do so, we believe that those can then be applied to private property through the ordinance that you've already passed.
Okay, all right, that's good to hear. And when you say publicly owned, it also applies to publicly leased?
Correct.
So if there were a property owner in my district who had a big space, and as long as we're paying $1 a year for a lease, we're good?
That's possible, yes.
Okay, all right, good. What specifically, in terms of different types of structures, does this enable that aren't legal now?
The current state law only allowed existing facilities to really be utilized. The state law that was just passed says any development that is established, so we can sort of decide what projects the city wants to impose on these properties, and I believe that there's been some discussion on what those types of projects might look like, but there are no limitations so long as there are minimum health and safety standards that would apply to whatever those developments are.
So there was a working group that worked together on figuring out a way forward to utilize the state law, and the request when Building and Safety and Fire were coming up with these alternatives was to make sure that it could apply to things like the trailers that are going up on El Pueblo and other things like tension membrane structures, larger temporary but manufactured quickly types of construction, but trying to keep it loose enough that if there are other types of modalities that we're not aware of, they could apply to that as well.
Tension membrane structures, is that the kind of thing Andy Bayless has been talking about?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, all right. Tiny houses?
Yes, well, that was one of the options that was on the table or in mind when these were developed.
Okay.
Yes.
Last question is, I saw something in here that there's some things that could limit capacity. My notes say like limiting sleeping quarters to only the ground floor. What does that apply to? If I had someone who's allowing me to lease the second floor of a mixed-use property, wouldn't that disallow me from putting people in that space?
As I understand it, would disallow you from taking advantage of some of these it wouldn't disallow that from happening, it would just disallow it from taking advantage of these relaxed requirements, but building and safety can
actually do
that. Actually, you should.
Separate provision that's in there for that.
Right, that was
The first floor.
That was a fire department recommendation. Handy Melky up here.
Handy Malku with the fire department. The intent of having it on the first floor, and if you look at the provisions at the end of the ordinance or the language change, it'll allow alternate means of compliance. So we will take it case by case. The concern about that we have, the fire marshal has, is being able to access the building and help the people in case of emergencies, to help them either medical or fire. The second thing, availability of potential elevators or stairs, and how do we get to them in case. But we will take it case by case, which the ordinance will allow us to.
Yeah, because the sort of counterbalance on this is what I presume is the department's concern about how often it has to do a paramedics call for someone suffering from exposure on the street. people suffering living in the elements, to which this is an alternative. What would be the way of addressing this in order to use a second or a third story of a building?
Currently, we do have a process, what we call a modification or alternate means of compliance. So there's a form that they need to fill and state what the conditions that are under and the justification why we should allow that specific project to have shelter on the upper levels.
How long does that take?
It's administrative, so it doesn't take long. I would say within a week, within days actually, a day or two typically.
Okay.
So
Right.
it's not a long process, just to assure that they do have to comply with the minimum requirements that we will need for accessibility and to be able to use the elevators to go up and down for gurneys.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So our declaration expires in April, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And so can we have this in place before then?
That's our goal. So if this gets approved, and I believe it should be on Friday's council agenda, that will authorize the city to send these regulations to the state for review on Friday. They'll have 30 days to come back to us with recommendations, so there's enough time for us to come back in April before our declaration expires.
Okay, and then we're planning to do a new declaration, correct?
Yes.
We do year-round now.
We recommend another year round, yes, sir.
And as was mentioned in public testimony, I strongly encourage us to start thinking more about these emergency crisis type shelters. We wouldn't be able to do this as much as we're doing now if we didn't have a long-term plan. We have a long-term plan now with more permanent supportive housing. So now we're moving forward on doing everything possible on our shelters, and now that the state has given us an opportunity to expand and do more and not just stick to trailers, but get more creative, tents or whatever else that we provide these. But last but not least, when we do this, we would have to remind ourselves that we not only think about the structure that we're putting in, we're going to get more flexibility with this, but we should always think about making sure we provide the services on site. That's going to be so important. Whatever we do, and we get more flexibility for providing more structures or whatever it is, we always have to lead with services first, help them where they're at, and eventually get them on a path to recovery to permanent supportive housing. That's kind of like the goal that we have in anything like this. So I just want to see, as we get a new ordinance or whatever we have to do here, I'm not sure there's opportunities to put some language in there for that as well, but
yes, sir.
we'll continue to discuss.
On the services side, that we were really encouraged to see the draft Measure H recommendations came out on Monday of this week for the next fiscal year, for the 18-19 fiscal year, and there's anticipated capacity within those recommendations to expand emergency shelter countywide by about 3,200 beds. So we were very encouraged that that meets the funding gap identified in the gaps analysis, but it's that we're hopeful that we'll be able to take advantage of as many of those beds as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Huizar. One last question on this. So recently this committee considered, and I believe the council will consider soon, good neighbor policy for shelters. Is it your opinion that should we go forward with that would apply to these shelters under this provision as well?
Good neighbor policy?
Yes. With Councilmember Rodriguez put forward?
The motion that was introduced yesterday?
Yeah.
Yes. I haven't had a chance to review. I believe that was relative to the winter shelter program next year. I think we could look at, and we would defer to LASA on applicability of that to other emergency we would anticipate, hopefully, these applying to year-round programs that are 24/7, but we would look at whether or not that could apply to other programs outside of the winter shelter program, sure. I think, from what I hear, that was a very successful measure.
Thank you. There are no other questions or comments. We will adopt the motion and approve the report. Hearing none, that brings us to item number 3.
Councilmember, I'm sorry, can I just clarify, are part of the recommendations to also have the city attorney begin finalizing the draft of this ordinance as the state is considering it?
We are amenable to such a recommendation.
We would expedite the process.
Thank you.
Item number 3 is a motion by Council Members Huizar and Bonin relative to the use of parking lot 5 at El Pueblo de Los Angeles Historical Monument as emergency shelter and categorical exemption from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to Article 19, Sections 15301, Class 1, 15304, Class 4 ABE, and 15332, Class 32, detailed in the Notice of Exemption reflected on the February 28, 2018 Bureau of Engineering report attached to the Council file. This item was scheduled pursuant to Council action of February 13, 2018.
Thank you so much. So we have a number of public comment cards on this matter. Mr. Alfred Beltran, you actually have a card on 2 items, so if you could come up, you'll have 2 minutes.
First of all, thank you guys for your attention to the homeless. Obviously, we've needed it for a long, long time. Your commitment is admirable, and I hope we do the right thing. But there is some things that we need to look into. Safe parking in Los Angeles, for example. You guys have shown support, but the police force isn't. We've already got a couple of lots, and they do not want us. They don't want us in any neighborhood. We need support there. We need you guys to speak to them. You need to tell them we are going to organize the people for them. We can't do everyone, but the cars, we could try to get them in the right place instead of running someone's house, school, park. This is going to be a big difference for us to move forward. We have money. We're not taking it from HHH. We have our own money. We just need your support to get the police force on board with us. We really do. We're trying to do the best we can, but without that support, very much we can do.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Elizabeth Kuykendall, Mike Lee, Raquel Roman.
Hi, my name is Elissa Kuykendall. I'm an entrepreneur, and I have a tech startup called Arcvita. We're headquartered in the Arts District. I'm also a longtime Angelino. When I heard about this temporary shelter over near Alvaro Street, I also heard that there was some opposition, and I was really surprised because I think it's awesome that we're trying something different. Like, let's try it. Let's try a parking lot pop-up shelter. Let's do it with hygiene. Let's do it. So I marshaled some other volunteers. We went out last Sunday, and we surveyed about 30 people. We spent an hour just talking to everybody we could, and I have copies of what we did. What we found when we talked to people is about 21% of the people that we talked to were more likely to visit the Alvaro Street area after the proposed homeless shelter was created. Another 52% of the people that we spoke with said they would be just as likely to visit Alvaro Street with or without the shelter. 86% of the people we surveyed thought that the homelessness issue is a significant problem in that immediate area.
Mr. Chair, can I ask her to finish her report, even because it's interesting information? Can you finish your
Thank
comments,
you.
please? Yeah.
Further, the free comments that we collected, and I have a few copies for you, indicated broad support for the proposed shelter and an expectation that you as city officials should be helping homeless people urgently, and also improving the street area safety and cleanliness were mentioned several times. A few people who thought that they would be less likely to visit Alvaro Street after the proposed shelter also indicated positive support for the shelter. So for the people that said, no, I would be less likely to visit Alvaro Street if we did the shelter, they then said, we need to do something. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was interesting. And also, broadly speaking, I support this personally. And as I mentioned, I'm a volunteer, and we marshaled other volunteers.
Thank you. Quickly, when was this done?
Sunday.
And what was your sample? You just walked around and talked to people?
It wasn't statistically.
It's not scientific.
So, no.
You walked around and asked people as they walked through.
Yeah, so if you're familiar with the area, we stood outside the plaza at the end of Alvaro Street.
Yeah.
And we showed people, we had color copies of this map.
Right.
So we showed people, okay, we're standing at the end of Alvaro Street. Here's where you are. Here's this little plot of land. This is what the city wants to do. We briefly described the 5 trailers, one for hygiene, and then we had these questions, and I'll share this copy with you, basically saying, like, what do you think, is this going to impact you coming to visit Alvaro Street? And simple survey. Again, only 29 people spoke to us, but we approached everyone, and so the people who did speak to us were a mix of ethnicity, age.
Mostly tourists?
No, some locals tourists, I would say, like
Local tourists.
Fresno, Oceanside, you know, Gardena, but then also London,
Thank you for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
I'd like to speak in favor of the proposed housing, El Pueblo temporary housing shelter. I'm representing Dolores Mission. We have on-site a Proyecto Pastoral and a shelter. I also want to warrant my comments in the United Nations document and the immediate obligation of the government to protect the human right to housing, in particular access to land, and to prevent third parties from interfering with state needs or government needs, the community, the common goods need, and obligation to provide adequate housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Raquel Roman. I'm the program director of the 2 homeless shelters at Proyecto Pastoral at Dolores Mission Church. I'm here in support of the emergency shelter that is being proposed at El Pueblo de Los Angeles and any efforts to build permanent supportive housing. As an Angelina and having lived 2 blocks from the area and as a homeless advocate, this emergency shelter is critical and long overdue. Many of the people that live around the area consider those streets their home, and it is important that we meet people where they're at. The issue has, in the last 10 years, I would say it's gotten a lot worse, and it's time that we act now. It's our responsibility to take care of our brothers and sisters. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, could you say your name into the record?
My name is Michael Lee.
Thank you. All right, Tom Grody, Lakeisha, Beth Ann Morrison, Michael Page.
Tom Grody from Skid Row. I just want to comment on Elisa's little survey by just saying that while I respect the fact that it's focused on this specific parking lot and the issue of Olivera Plaza, obviously there's a bigger picture here of all of downtown and specifically Skid Row. So I hope this goes forward for the people. It will positively impact, but also things need to happen in order for some best practices to be established so that things can be expanded. And I'm specifically thinking Skid Row, which is only a 5-minute walk south of where it's going to be. So the more things can be moving forward, the better for everybody.
So I accidentally just hit the wrong button in the computer, so I meant to hit something else.
What number did you want to speak on?
The 4th one, I think.
4, tell me your name.
Or Michael.
Michael?
Yeah.
Page?
Yeah.
All right, we'll come back to you.
Yeah, I'll
come back to you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Beth Ann Morrison. I am a resident of Skid Row, and I wanted to first thank you all for your service, and especially thank you to Mr. Huizar and Mr. Bonin for your engagement. I want to support this emergency housing measure wholeheartedly. As an artist and a LA resident for a number of years now, I think it's very encouraging that you're thinking out of the box this way. And I'd also like to, well, first of all, I would hope that these things can happen all over the city, but also I want to put a word in for the way that they're approached. I like that you're thinking about flexible options, and if they could be also inspiring places, I think that would be another level. I know there's a lot of darkness around this issue, and we sometimes don't think that we can go above and beyond and offer a space that is actually uplifting and beautiful, and I think that's possible.
Thank you. Beth Ann Morrison. That was you? Yeah. You're supposed to disappear off of this when you speak. There you go. You left now. Okay. Elizabeth Kuykendall. You spoke already? All right. We have staff on this matter.
For an update. Would you guys, we heard this item at the last Homeless and Poverty Committee. We wanted to hold off on the full voting of this for a couple of weeks until we went out and did some more community meetings. We've held a few more community meetings. Maybe if you could just give us an update of where we are with the project and also what is the feedback from the community meetings that we have held.
Yeah, I'll do so. My name is Chris Espinosa. I'm the General Manager of El Pueblo Historical Monument. At the Council of Mayor's direction, we held a whole series of community meetings, including at the El Pueblo Commission, and had long discussions with the Olvera Street merchants. We also work with about 12 different nonprofits and 2 churches on site. The community was mixed in its response. There were a number of nonprofits who very much support this effort, and I think the merchants were very much concerned about their ability to continue to make revenue or any negative perceptions of visitation of Olvera Street. But in my discussions with them on a regular basis, I believe that their heart is ready to assist, that it's a very difficult issue when you have day-to-day sales and you're a small business owner. But I truly believe that a number of the merchants will gather behind and we will approach this as a unified community, and I strongly feel that. On March 1st, 2018, the El Pueblo Commission approved the Notice of Exemption, a board resolution, and a board report to move forward with this project, and that went forward unanimously. El Pueblo believes that this is the appropriate location for this type of facility. It is discreetly placed in the outside of the historic resources proper, but I believe that the design of the shelter will be well executed by the Bureau of Engineering, and we stand ready to assist in any way we can.
So just to follow up on that with some administrative stuff. So when this was in committee 2 weeks ago, you approved the funding, and that allowed us to move the money into and create the necessary accounts to begin construction as soon as the committee approves and the council approves the project, subject to the Bureau of Engineering coming with the CEQA analysis. So that CEQA analysis was transmitted on February 28th. As Chris mentioned, the El Pueblo Commission approved a notice of exemption pursuant to the CEQA analysis, and now that is before you so that you can approve the project and the other recommendations that were referred back to this committee a couple of weeks ago. In addition, there has been an additional need for, GSD has requested to use Lot 4 on the El Pueblo site as a staging area during construction for 3 or 4 months. The Bureau of Engineering has reviewed that request against the CEQA analysis and found that it doesn't change the outcome of that analysis. That was, the city attorney has said that we need to put that on the record. So no change to the CEQA analysis as a result of the temporary use of Lot 4 for construction. And also, since the time that we had this this before you with the funding recommendations, the Department of General Services has finalized the construction budget for this project and the different funding allocations that need to go into their various accounts. So I have some technical language to read into the record in order for us to be able to move the funding out of the CIEP and into the GSD accounts. It's been provided to the clerk, but I'm told I need to read it. So I can do that at this time if that's okay. Or
has the total cost changed?
The total cost has changed. We may be coming back to you with some adjustments to that as well.
Through the action today?
But not through the action today. We're
Okay.
still verifying. We want to only come back to you once.
Up or down? Yeah.
Down. It's
Down.
gone up.
Up, okay.
Yeah, it will go up.
Okay.
So there's just some issues that weren't known at that time that have increased the cost. So the recommendation that we would ask that the committee make would be that the council, subject to approval of the mayor, transfer $1,056,172 from the CIEP Fund 154, account number 00P296, entitled El Pueblo Shelter, to the General Services Department Fund 100/40 as follows. Into account number 001014, Salaries Construction Projects, the amount of $31,700. Into account number 001101, Hiring Hall Salaries Construction, the amount of $90,200. Into account number 001121, hiring hall benefits construction, $53,100. Into account number 003040, contractual services, the amount of $397,978. And into account number 003180, construction materials and supplies, $483,194 for a total of $1,056,172.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, I want to first thank the mayor's office for the creativity. And this is something that I think the public has been waiting for and wanting for a long time. They pulled in my office to be partners with them on this. But I think we all made a huge mistake as we move forward with it, and that is we never went out and spoke to the merchants or the local community. When the merchants came out to the last meeting, there was over between 15 to 30 of them here really upset because they had not been talked to about the plan. And in anything we do, whether we're creating permanent supportive housing or these types of shelters, there's always going to be neighbors who don't want them there. And it's not going to say that we're going to agree with them that they shouldn't be there after we talk to them, but we should at least go out and talk to them, and they're going to probably give us input to make this a better plan. I went out last night to the merchants. I organized a meeting with them. It was a room full of people, over 40, 50 people there, and merchants were still very upset. And I think if we had gone out to them early on and explained to them what we're trying to do, they probably would have been a bit more receptive. But since they felt that we're ramming it through and now we're bringing them in at the end, they rightly are very upset. So we heard them out, and I tried to explain to them that what we have right now is simply not working. We have a number of homeless individuals coming around the Pueblo. The numbers are increasing. We go out there with encampment cleanups. Within a day or a couple of days, it's back to what it was before. So if we are wanting to help the individuals and wanting for the tourists and everyone else to walk around and not have public rights-of-way blocked, I explained to them as the goal of this is to get those individuals there at that location, in one location, get them on a path to recovery, eventually to permanent supportive housing, and then it would allow us to enforce 5611 because we're also building storage nearby. And at the end of the day, it's the answer to their problem, because they also are not too happy with the influx and number of new homeless individuals around El Pueblo. So I told them that we should try this for 6 months. I know what we're going to do is 3 years. That's our plan, 60 to 70 individuals every 6 months on a rotating basis for a 3-year plan. But I committed to them that we come back in 6 months and see how it's working. Now, the trick is going to be, are we able to enforce 5611 around that area so that they feel that this is helpful, is working for them? And so as we move forward, I'd love to amend this to that we have a report back in 6 months, Mr. Chair, after the implementation of the project, so that we could get some feedback as to whether we are, number one, helping individuals, as we said we were, that go through the trailers and the new shelters, but secondly, also help those individuals who are at that location. Their biggest fear was that this will be a magnet, that we're going to bring more homeless to the area rather than help those who are there. So we have to find those indicators of success. What are they? And come back and report to see if we're fulfilling our goals or not within 6 months. But as we see, this is something that is new, and it's a type of response we've got to start doing all over the city. I know we're going to hear next a motion by Mr. Bonin and Harris Dawson how we could do citywide. We approved 2 weeks or in council last week one for Skid Row. But we're going to start doing this all over the city, as this is one of the first. We have a lot to learn here, and even in 6 months, we'll get back some good data to see what's working, what's not, what's best practices, so we can move forward. But we hope to continue working with the merchants to alleviate their fears and concerns, and this has to be successful. A lot is riding on this, because we hope to expand this and scale it up to other parts of the city. If this fails, we don't do it right here, if we slip again, it's going to have huge consequences for the rest of the city and Skid Row. So thank you so much for your work on this.
Thank you so much, Mr. Huizar. If there are no other questions or comments, we will adopt this matter as amended without objection. Takes us to
Mr.
item
Chair.
number 4.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to read in the recommendations that are
Yes.
being adopted today?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the recommendations include adopting the CEQA report on file, approving the use of parking lot 5 at the El Pueblo de Los Angeles Historical Monument located at 711 North Alameda Street for temporary use as an emergency shelter to house men and women experiencing homelessness for up to 36 months pursuant to case law regarding the use of parkland. Request LASA to procure a nonprofit service provider to operate a temporary crisis shelter at 711 North Alameda for up to 6 months through June 30th, 2018, with the option to extend for a total of no more than 36 months. Request LASA, with the assistance of the homeless coordinator, to report with recommendations to fund the operations of the shelter beyond June 30th, 2018, including a possible request for proposals for continued operations and the transfer of funds as presented by the CAO earlier, as well as Mr. Huizar's amendment.
And to be clear, the amendment is a report back with indicators of success as defined by the CAO that after the program has begun. So not now, but 6 months after we've started the program.
All right, without objection.
Mr. Chair, Sigmund Chu, City Attorney's Office. Just as a clarification, the adopting of the CEQA report on file as reflected in the February 28th, 2018 BOE report, can I read the specific recommendation into the record?
Sure.
Okay, so the specific recommendation for the CEQA report is that Council determined that downtown Los Angeles temporary shelter project, which allows the use of parking lot 5 for use as temporary shelter, is categorically exempt from the provisions of CEQA pursuant to Article 19, Sections 15301, Class 1, 15304, Class 4, subsections A, B, and E, and 15332, Class 32.
Thank you. So ordered. Number 4.
Okay. Item number 4 is a motion by Council Members Bonin, Harris, Dawson, Buscaino relative to an update of Strategy 7A of the Comprehensive Homelessness Strategy that includes the number of beds, facilities, and percentage of the homeless being served in a framework of an emergency response to homelessness plan with steps and funding requirement for alternative encampments that includes a comprehensive list of every public facility in the city eligible to be used as shelter, temporary housing, or safe parking.
Excellent, thank you. So we have one public comment speaker on this matter, Karine Ho.
Good afternoon, Council Member. My name is Corinne Ho. I'm a constituent of Council District 3 under Mr. Bob Blumenfield. For identification purposes only, I am also the former president of the Canoga Park Neighborhood Council, but here with my opinion reflecting my own. First of all, thank you to the committee, to the 3 council members for this motion to request LASA for this extensive report. I think the public wants to know this information that you are requesting from LASA. So looking forward to that. I would like to make a suggestion to the committee. When you come to a neighborhood and build, when the city comes to the neighborhood and build permanent supportive housing, that you would look at CES, which is a wonderful system to prioritize the housing. Is my time up? It's to prioritize the housing for the homeless who are already residing in that neighborhood and move out to the next neighborhood, prioritizing that.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Chair?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. I just wanted to sort of frame it a bit, if I might. Thank you. So I've talked about shelter a lot for a couple of years. I actually looked back at something from a couple of years ago that I had written in a constituent newsletter about what we need to be doing, and it was exactly the same thing that I'm asking for today. What I wanted to do with this motion I do with Mr. Harris Dawson is try to reframe how we look at this issue with urgency and fierce impatience. And I've said this many times before, but if there were a natural disaster and tens of thousands of people were forced onto the streets of our neighborhoods, we would not be responding the way we are responding. We wouldn't say to them, we're going to house 3,000 of you in 3 years, the rest of you stay on the sidewalks, and keep having the police move people around on the sidewalks and ask sanitation to remove their belongings. We would never, ever do that. If it were a natural disaster, if it were a refugee crisis, we would not do that. And the system that we have, which says you can either have permanent supportive housing or LAPD and LA SAN, which is essentially where we are, is a system. Every day I get a greater appreciation. This is a system that could have been designed by the Mad Hatter. It just doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't think it makes sense to most of us. It doesn't make sense to the people who voted for H and Triple H. It certainly doesn't make sense to the people who are living on the street. It doesn't make sense to the parents I talk to who have to walk their kids off the sidewalks and into the middle of the streets to get to school because we have encampments there. And I don't think anybody likes that we have encampments. Some people say just move them, but they're not going to go anywhere. We're not going to have cops patrolling our streets for any number of issues proactively if they're always getting calls about encampments. We have to have alternatives to encampments. So what I want us to do with this motion is to report back immediately. Like 14 days for me was a long time to ask for, and say, what can we do to get people off the sidewalks and into someplace warmer, someplace safer, someplace more humane? So in this, what I'd specifically ask is that when you do this, can you talk to FEMA? Can you talk to the Red Cross? And I'd actually like to amend the motion and ask that it not just be LASA, but you bring in the Emergency Management Department and the CLA and CAO on this. Because I think we really need to get out of the mindset we've been in and make this about how do we get people off the streets in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bonin, for that frame. I would just reiterate the sense of urgency that comes with an emergency, and oftentimes we can take the approach that we're managing resources, so whether it's HHH resources or services resources, and our approach is like, oh, we're dispersing these in a responsible and a prudent and an efficient way. And that's good, and we should absolutely do that. But we're in emergency. And so when you're in emergency, the first question isn't, am I overspending or am I, giving the money to the right people, which we spend a lot of time on, frankly. And we spend a lot of time on that while people are sleeping on the streets. And so as you all engage us on this issue that we put forward, hopefully that's part of the context and that's part of the approach that you take as you're responding to us. Councilman Price?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your alarm, the bell that you're ringing, and that of Mr. Bonin and both of you have been a consistent voice, and Mr. Weezer as well on this issue. I like the idea, quite frankly, of also getting the churches involved. We got to be a little more proactive in getting churches intentionally involved and engaged. Several of the churches in my district, for example, have been very vocal about wanting to be involved. We've had a meeting. We had a meeting in December. In fact, LASA supported that. CAO, HOPIX, and some folks from SPA 6 were all there, participated. And we think there are lots of ways that we can get churches involved and engaged. We got to figure out how we cut some of the red tape, and just like we're doing with building and safety and planning, kind of clearing the way so that, again, these resources can be utilized. Many of them, may not be eligible for specific levels of funding, but they could be. And so I think we need to start having that conversation with these organizations many of whom have space, they got land, some of them they're already doing some sheltering, they want to do more, and I think we got to find ways to engage our faith-based community, especially, those that are in the neighborhoods who are dealing with this issue, who have been dealing with it in their own way, providing shelter, providing food, sometimes, weekly programs. They're trying to do a lot with little or no resources. And again, I think there's an opportunity for us to step in, be proactive with our faith-based community in ways that we haven't before. I hope you'll take a look at that.
Peter Lynn, I'm the Executive Director for the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. I appreciate the opportunity to address this motion and appreciate the urgency with which you're putting it forward. I want to call attention to the fact that we have worked with the city and with the county to raise up the issue repeatedly about the gaps that we see in all of the resources that are deployed in the County of Los Angeles, the City of Los Angeles, to address homelessness. I think that if you had an opportunity to read our housing gaps analysis that was released last month, elevated the fact that there are significant gaps in resources. Shelter is among them. Permanent supportive housing, we found 22,000 unit gap, permanent supportive housing in the County of Los Angeles. We're going to have to lift up the entire infrastructure. Shelter is an important piece of it. I want to raise up the fact that with the funding increases that we saw in 16-17 and again in 17-18 with Measure Age, we were able to improve outcomes from shelters fairly dramatically. So if you looked at our shelter outcomes a couple years ago, we're getting single digits, maybe 10% of the people who move through that shelter placed into permanent housing. We've more than doubled that over the entire portfolio, and with the really focused attention that we have with our reserve beds, with our bridge housing, we're seeing almost 50% permanent housing exits out of the shelter infrastructure. And that's a program change with funding behind it. So, the results can be dramatically improved with the right funding and the right programmatic changes, and the systemic infrastructure behind it, right, with the housing resources to move people through. Happy to address this and happy to lay before the committee and before the council the kinds of numbers that you're talking about. These are not small numbers, and you know that. So we will bring that back. I don't have the same kind of access to the way that FEMA delivers sort of, in a crisis. So 14 days may be a stretch in terms of getting those kinds of data, but we'll work on it. Certainly, I can talk through what the cost would be on the infrastructure that we are familiar with and fund, and the funding levels for the kinds of shelter that we've invested in the portfolio in the County of Los Angeles. So we'll work on the emergency services side. When we had the El Nino threat a couple years ago, we did work with working with the chief administrative officer. They published emergency rules. You guys passed a resolution to actually free up the capacity for faith-based organizations to implement themselves as shelter. And those rules were implemented. There was a fairly, it wasn't the simplest thing in the world, but there was a path, and it's still on the website. The ordinance is it's no longer an emergency. That is the kind of thing that, could be done, and you liberate the emergency status for all the faith organizations and anybody else who wants to become a shelter to do that. So, certainly we would sort of point back to that.
Yeah. Can you bring that to us?
I certainly would, yeah. It was, several steps, but it was, it's the kind of thing that you're talking about. If it were that level of emergency, houses of worship would open their pews and people would be sleeping on them. And so, those are the kinds of data that we can certainly bring back. I wouldn't be remiss not to lift up the fact that the core crisis in Los Angeles is affordable housing. We have a homeless crisis, but the driver of that is the fact that we have the least affordable housing in America. We need to build a lot more housing. We need to have a lot of it be affordable. The gap in affordability in the County of Los Angeles that was raised up by the California Housing Partnership was over 500,000 units of affordability in the County of Los Angeles. We have more than 500,000 very low-income households hanging on by their fingertips here. That's the core driver. We need to raise that up and build more affordable housing. We also need the rest of the infrastructure in place. We need the PSH, we need the rapid rehousing, we need shelter infrastructure, we need a comprehensive outreach network, and those are all things that are funded now at a much higher degree through Measure H, and we are able to build things that we never had before. We are putting together coordinated outreach to a degree that we've never seen before. We have outreach coordinators in every service planning area. Every outreach that's out there, over 600 outreach workers are now linked into a coordinated network, so they're avoiding duplication, they're being dispatched and triaged together. The support from the county, we're putting together a portal for requests for outreach. We have, LAS has built a bed availability app to identify where outreach workers can take their shelter, which shelters are going to have availability for beds, and we're working with our county partners on implementing that for other service provision, other kinds of service, slots in various shelter modalities out there. But the level of shelter that you're requesting with this motion is, far in excess of that. So we would be, we'll bring this back and in the timing that you asked for.
Mr. Bonin.
Yeah, I appreciate that the circumstances are different than the ones FEMA deals with, but I'd like us to talk to FEMA.
Oh, yes.
I know, for instance, I keep hearing people are emailing me, there are FEMA trailers available. They can't sell to private institutions or private, but they can sell or provide to government. That may be a way to reduce costs of doing the types of things that Mr. Huizar is doing. And I appreciate, and I want to commend you for having the better outcomes for the shelters. It's just the number of people who are in shelter is so horribly, horribly low. And I'm now having people from Brentwood coming to me and saying, let's set up tents on the VA campus. Let's do safe parking on the VA campus. I mean, people in the neighborhoods on the west side are saying, let's provide shelter. And we know what we're going to do, the number of units Triple H will provide. And so we know over 10 years we need to do this, over 3 years we need to do this, and we agreed for the 3-year part of it, we will get that done equally. We need to know how many beds does each council district need to be providing. We know, I presume, that in the case of an emergency, we know that there are certain regional city facilities, recreation centers or something that we would use as a shelter. We should be looking at those right now. We need to look at the whole gamut of things. Yeah, we did a couple years ago make it easier for churches. Churches aren't hearing that from us, though. There's nobody out there banging on the doors, and it's not necessarily you that needs to be doing this, but nobody's banging on the doors and saying, please take 20 people in tonight. I mean, nobody is actually doing that. We're trying to do it a little bit on safe parking, but the megaphone isn't there, the magnification isn't there. And if you can come back to us with a strategy of how to do something really big and urgent, we can all stand together. We can bring in the mayor. We can stand in front of 12 cameras and say, this is what has to be done over the next month. And then folks will start paying attention. The churches might step forward. If I go out and say I'm going to open a recreation center in my district to shelter, it's going to be hell to pay in that neighborhood. But if there's 15 of us standing together and people are hearing we're all doing this in 2 or 3 places, then people understand we're all in this together. And we have to get to that point. I implore you, please talk to the Red Cross as well. Folks who know how to stand stuff up quickly. God willing, what we stand up for, that we could stand up in 30 days won't be what we want to be doing in a year. We probably want to improve it, but I appreciate the crux of it is the affordable housing crisis. You're absolutely right. But identifying the affordable housing crisis as the source of the problem, albeit true, is like telling people in New Orleans a few years ago that the problem was that the levees weren't strong enough or weren't high enough. We get that. We need to fix that, but we need to get people off the street tonight. So as soon as possible. 3,200 from the county, that's disappointing. That's really disappointing. We've got to do better than that. We have to.
All right, any other questions or comments? If not, we'll adopt this motion and send it to full.
If we could amend it to
Oh, I'm sorry.
include not just LASA, but bring in the Emergency Management Department and make sure CAO is part of that conversation, so our czar can corral.
As amended.
Thank you.
So ordered. Number 5. Thank you.
Item number 5 is a verbal report from the City Attorney relative to the programs of the Community Justice Initiative, including Homeless Engagement and Response Team, early discovering opportunities for outreach and reflection, and administrative citation enforcement.
Thank you. So we have 3 public comment cards on this matter. Shelby Lee, Stephen Morlock, and Ryan Kelly. 1 minute each.
Hi,
In any order, yes.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Shelby Lee, a member of Democratic Socialists of America, and I believe that housing is a human right. I want to urge you to go a step further than the HEART program's homeless citation clinics and issue an injunction on quality of life citations. Let's just stop issuing these citations altogether in the first place. They're hugely problematic and criminalize poverty and homelessness, and my guess is that the existence of these clinics indicate that y'all agree. And I also want to point out that they're counterproductive, and they prevent folks from accessing employment, social services, and permanent housing. I also just want to point out that this city has pushed folks to sleep on the streets and created a lot of frustrating and inscrutable rules around where a person can and can't be, and what possessions a person is and isn't allowed to have, and where a person is supposed to put those possessions. And so it's inevitable that these citations will pile up. And so I suggest that we solve this problem with permanent housing instead of,
Thank you.
Citations. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Ryan Kelly. I'm also with the Democratic Socialists of America. I observed a sanitation sweep this morning in Highland Park. It is something I encourage all of you to do personally. Go unannounced, go in casual clothes. I guarantee no one there will recognize your celebrity. The experience will give you an understanding that's had by the people I talked to this morning that the sweeps are an apparatus deeply entwined with the criminalization of poverty, which is what these quality of life citations amount to. The way they compound upon themselves and create warrants for arrest out of basically nothing is grotesque. It's obscene. We can do better, and so I urge you to find the political will to seek an injunction against any further quality of life citations. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephen Morlock, also with the Democratic Socialists of America. I'm also here to advocate for an injunction. My comments in regards to ACE, the program of citing our unhoused residents for the crime of simply trying to live. Over the last decade or two, the city's ramped up the criminalization of our unhoused population. To what result? Homelessness has continued to rise to historic levels while we're subjecting our most vulnerable residents to increased harassment, abuse, and now fines and jail time, on top of all else they have to deal with not having a place to live. The solution to our homeless crisis is housing, anti-poverty measures, health and psychiatric treatment, stuff like that, not criminalization. Criminalization is cruel, it's cynical, and it only exacerbates the problem.
Thank you. We have representatives from the City Attorney's Office to speak on this matter.
Good afternoon, Rita Venegas from the City Attorney's Office, and I supervise the ACE program. And I think there's been some confusion today about the Administrative Citation Enforcement Program. They are non-criminal citations, so they don't show up on anyone's criminal history. They don't count as arrests, and these violations merely deal with municipal code violations. And there was some discussion about 5611, and to date, LAPD has been writing citations since mid-January of 2015. We have not processed or any violations for 5611. Just this
So
year.
by not processed, you mean that the citations were issued by LAPD but charges weren't pressed by the city attorneys?
They were not submitted to us at all. So they did not write any administrative violation citations for 5611 at all since this year.
And Guido O'Neill from the City Attorney's Office also. Just to be clear, this is the, Rita represents the Administrative Code Enforcement Unit, ACE, not the infraction tickets that LAPD has the option to write under 5611. They can write an infraction ticket or a misdemeanor. So her unit, though LAPD can write an ACE ticket on 5611, which can be problematic when someone's homeless, LAPD has not written an ACE citation on 5611. All of their tickets are infractions or misdemeanors. Is that clear? And it's a little confusing because the citation, I know.
It's as clear as mud.
Leave it to lawyers to make it more confusing. Sorry. So LAPD has a lot of different kind of tools in their toolbox.
Let me help. Are homeless people getting tickets of any kind?
Yes.
Okay. But this program doesn't necessarily, the kind of tickets that people are getting are not the kind that this program helps with. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's not necessarily true. If somebody receives a citation for a municipal code violation, let's just say it's a drinking in public, and there are many persons that are cited just based on their address, we know that they're either at a social service agency or they may be, Skid Row, just because, they have an ID, they were cited. Those citations are referred to our homeless engagement and outreach team, which Mr. Shibuya is here as a representative of that team, and those are dealt with at citation clinics every month. So that the person, if they're cited, those citations are not processed. So a person wouldn't receive, a notice of violation in the mail when we are able to identify them up front. We attend all the citation clinics, and if we're able to identify that person is coming to that clinic, we'll refer them for whatever services are there and some community service to clear up their citation, which at the end of the day, it's still a misdemeanor, but it's handled administratively. Once a person is cited and they receive something in the mail, they have 20 days to either pay or request that the citation be dismissed. We've had several persons who say, I'm a student, or I'm homeless, or I'm at risk of homelessness. We take those citations, and those are referred to our neighborhood justice program. And what happens is then they're seen, by a panel, and that panel, tries to connect them. The ultimate goal is to connect them with services. So when we become apprised of the fact that they are homeless or at risk of homelessness, we deal with them. Some we're unable, up front, to tell whether or not, they are in that type of situation.
And Michael Evans is here from the Neighborhood Justice Program, if you'd like to hear from them too.
Shall I speak to kind of what we do at this
Yes.
moment? Okay. Council, thank you for your attention to this matter and issue. Part of what we do when we get a case that's referred to us, we handle misdemeanor criminal offenses.
Got it.
So there is a percentage of the cases that we do handle that are the population that we're discussing and our community members that we're trying to find solutions for. Part of what will happen in a panel is that we will do an informal needs assessment along with walking through whatever the offense is from the participant's perspective, take a look at the harm that was caused both for the individual and for the community, and then look for ways to repair that harm. Along with that, as I said, we do the needs assessment. So we'll take a look at, is the person, do they have housing? Do they have proper medical attention? Do they have jobs? Can they put food on their table? To put context to that, one of the first cases that I handled was a homeless family, a family of 4. They were living in a van on and off the streets. Both of the parents got popped for a petty theft. So in this case, a crime of necessity. We were able to get that family linked up with wraparound social services that addressed both their living situation, employment situation for both of the parents, and also get social services for the kids as well, one of them being autistic. So that kind of gives you an idea of some of the cases
that we'll get, and then also other members of the City Attorney's Office will field in their various programs.
Hello, I'm Patrick Shibuya from the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office Homeless Engagement and Response Team. We operate the LA County Homeless Court Program. We do clinics in various parts of LA City and LA County, and we offer a free service, a chance for people to voluntarily come in, find out what their record is, and if their tickets can be helped. We give them the opportunity to go to a service provider in that area and connect up. They do hours of service instead of having to pay a fine, instead of having to do community service hours that they have to pay to enroll in. The types of things that they do either benefit the community, for example, helping in the food kitchens or doing general labor at one of these agencies, or they can do something that helps themselves. AA meetings, NA meetings, health screenings, job trainings, anger management sessions. And that choice is something that they make in coordination with the agency they choose to work with. Each one of these agencies also has a connection to some sort of housing. Either they provide it themselves or they operate in tandem with another program that does that. Our hope is that giving this voluntary incentive for people to come in and get connected in with these services, that they will take advantage of other services and work their way out. These tickets, some of them are for what people are calling quality of life tickets, but the majority of them, anecdotally, the majority of them are old traffic tickets. It may be for not having registration in a vehicle that they were living in. It could be even speeding or something like that. A lot of the tickets are years old, and they're never going to be able to pay the fines on them because the fines mount up into thousands of dollars. They're never going to be able to do community service on them. Some of them are already in collections. All these tickets do is hold people down because they can't move forward, they can't get a driver's license, they can't get an ID, they can't get a job based on that. So it gives them a chance to clean their slate of these tickets. So we've been doing that for a while, and a number of folks on the council have been very supportive of our efforts in this regard. And we've gone to the different council districts to set up our clinics. We operate on the fly in different places.
About how many people would you say are served on a quarterly basis?
In the first year that we were doing this, we had about 122 people come through. Next, we had the next year we had about 531 people go through. As of today, we have 186 that have been through thus far this year, but our fiscal year doesn't end until June, so we still have some time. And last year, in the period between now and the end of the fiscal year, we operated 9 clinics.
So one thing that we might do as a community resident or a community activist who cares, if we're observing a suite, for example, and we see what happens, and we see that some people are given tickets, it would make sense, or are you all in a position where we or anybody could refer the people that we observe getting tickets to you?
You certainly can. And in fact, we partner with the police department. Police department does refer people to our clinics. The next clinic we have coming up is on March 27th at the Downtown Public Library. We partner with the library, and every month on the last Tuesday of each month, they operate a program that benefits homeless folks or people going through homelessness who, during the lunch hour, they can just come in. And it's not just us. It's a number of different programs there, a number of different services. So if folks know that that is going to be there, they can talk to their friends, they can refer friends, they can come back if they didn't get complete services the first time they were there. It's having them have a place that they know is a touchstone. But additionally, we go out into the community in different areas, and we work through word of mouth and through different agencies in the communities where we set up.
And I'm Jamie Larson. I'm the director of our office's Recidivism Reduction and Drug Diversion Unit. It's a brand new unit. It's really tiny. We manage 3 projects in our 3-person shop right now. They're all focused on finding new ways to resolve the kinds of issues we're talking about here, where we get cases in our office and we recognize as prosecutors that the underlying misdemeanor conduct is an unmet social service need. It's not the case for all misdemeanors, certainly. It's not the case for many misdemeanors, but it is the case for a growing portion of misdemeanors coming into our shop. The project I'm here to talk about today is LA DOOR, and if you'll permit me to correct the agenda, the acronym is Diversion, Outreach, and Opportunities for Recovery. This is a South Bureau project in Southwest, Southeast, and 77th Divisions. This project was developed over a 2-year planning process in response to Proposition 47. As you all know, our office got a huge influx of cases that used to be felonies and are now misdemeanors, and this is sort of our first attempt to try something different with a caseload that we didn't have before, where we recognize that we're getting really, really poor outcomes in court for this population due to unmet social service needs and poorly attended to issues of addiction and poverty. So the goal of this project, as dictated by our funder, the state, is to respond to a population that has a history of coming through the criminal justice system and also currently has a substance use and or mental health issue. So it's not explicitly a homeless-focused project. However, the overlap of people who come into our office for prosecution on drug possession or drug-related misdemeanor offenses are homeless. So we expect considerable overlap, although it's not explicitly a homeless project. It's basically a 2-pronged approach. The first prong focuses on outreach to areas where we believe people are at an elevated risk of picking up a new Prop 47-related offense, elevated because they're in areas that involve where there's just a high level of street-level narcotics use and related activities. It might be a high level of theft that people believe is related to narcotics. Or you can come into the program through pre-booking diversion. So any officer making an arrest on a drug possession case.
I'm sorry, by your measurement of high narcotics use is based on where law enforcement says they're arresting people for narcotics, not where actual narcotics are being used.
So it's interesting. The original plan for this was 5 hotspot areas based on an overlap of mapping from LASA, where there was a high density of encampments, and an overlap of mapping from LAPD of where people were being arrested. So we looked for the strongest overlap, anticipating that people who are living in encampments and using at a street level were at higher risk. Literally from the time that we submitted our application to the time we were able to receive funds to now, HOPE has become very active, other outreach teams have become very active, and as a result, the hotspots have moved around a lot. So we are adapting to make sure that we are reaching the most vulnerable population where they currently are, but our original mapping has changed. So we've been going back and forth between getting information on current arrest trends, on slows, from council offices, from people in the neighborhood, from what our neighborhood prosecutors recommend. And we're trying 5 areas now. We soft launched last week, but we're adapting to the constant movement of people and trying to find new ways to meet people where they are. And they are moving a lot in South LA due to other operations going on there. I do want to emphasize that the outreach component of our operation is not tied at all to law enforcement. The only role that our office has is connecting people who our service providers work with to housing resources that our program has, to the panoply of services offered by the mobile team, which includes health services, mental health services, and substance use services, and connecting those people to Mr. Shibuya's program at Heart to alleviate some of those citation issues. Beyond that, we don't have, and connecting to the Public Defender's Office for a Prop 47 petition or to handle other matters that they might have unresolved. Beyond that, it's not a law enforcement project for the outreach component. The pre-booking diversion component just provides an avenue for those cases not to go to court, not even to be booked. So if they're not booked, it never shows up on the rap sheet that the arrest even happened.
Right. All right, thank you for that. My interruption was a point of particular sensitivity for us, that you're clear that you're tracking narcotics arrests as opposed to narcotics use.
Right.
Because, for example, I have a college campus right around my district that probably I'm guessing narcotics use is pretty high, but arrests are very low. So it's an important distinction for us.
And that, I understand that. Yeah, I really empathize with that. And there's no dispute, I think, about who's more likely to come into contact with law enforcement. But we are hopeful that this project can create a non-law enforcement response to, let's say, business areas who have some difficulty with somebody who's aggressively panhandling or loitering, or maybe who is known to have been stealing. This could be an option for a non-law enforcement response to that person that's based on outrage.
Thank you, Mr. Price.
Thank you. Thank you for your efforts, for your commitment. I got just a general question. One, how do you vet and select individuals who are on the panel of community volunteers? How do you, and would offenses like graffiti, are they eligible for this type of program?
I'll speak to that. As far as the vetting of our volunteer panelists, they go through an application process. Plus, there's also an intensive day training, and we do a large background check as well. And we also require them to come out and observe the panels to get an idea of what is the restorative justice process that we're engaged in. We've found that ends up self-selecting people that usually end up being very good candidates for the program. Graffiti cases are certainly eligible for our program. At present, the criteria that we look for are, is it a person who has a first-time offense? And what I mean by that is, do they have any prior convictions? Now, if they don't have any adult prior convictions, more than likely they're going to be eligible for our program. If they have juvenile prior convictions, we have accepted those cases as well. So it kind of gives you an idea of how we get cases, but then also how we vet the volunteer community.
And how many are on the panel?
Generally, we'll have 3 panelists, plus we'll have a trained facilitator, and then we'll have someone like myself, an administrative coordinator, to kind of protect the process and make sure that we're going through the conversation that we need to have.
And how many panels are there currently?
Currently, we have 12 panel locations throughout the city. We have one over in the west side, in Venice area, one down in San Pedro. We have one in Watts, South LA. We also have a new one in Boyle Heights, and then others in the Valley as well, and a Hollywood division too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Mr. Bonner?
Just a quick one. It's for DOOR, is it? Is that
Yes.
the acronym? The City Attorney's Office does an amazing job with acronyms. You guys have an acronym czar over there, I think. Just a quick question, because I'm glad to see that the state is finally providing some resources for the other side of Prop 47. They probably need to be doing a lot more, but glad to see they're providing some. I understand from the homeless CompStat meeting, that you're going to be able to provide housing placements for some people?
Yes.
30, is that what it is?
So it's 13, we hope, in the next few months, and then 29 per year for years 2 and 3.
And what does that housing look like? Is the money for rent? Is it for purchase? What is it?
So we're not homeless experts, right?
Mhm.
So and this is the first time as a criminal attorney that I've ever put together an RFP, or that our unit has gone through the RFP process. So we got a lot of advice from folks who work in Housing for Health, folks who work for Office of Diversion and Reentry, and folks who work for LASA. And the collective advice was to put together an RFP for interim housing. So a place where people in LA DOOR could be for 90 to 120 days, maybe longer, as appropriate for that individual person. And we talked a lot about how to be competitive, how to put out a bid that would be interesting and appealing to providers. And we set aside $1.5 million of our $6 million funds for these beds. So I'm not sure what exactly we'll have yet. Our RFP process is underway. We haven't finalized funding, but we set a rate at $65 per person per bed per day, on the understanding that that was that would be a competitive rate for the level of on-site services that we were expecting. And I will see what we get in the coming weeks.
So it could be sort of an existing operation or existing facility, and you'd just be sort of securing or renting those beds? Or is it actually you would be sort of the master landlord for a couple units?
We would not be So the funds can't be used to develop existing property.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure what we'll end up being able to acquire or to have on hand for this program, but it can't be used for development, and there's a lot of limits on how much of this fund can go into infrastructure. So I expect we'll be able to get something from an existing space. I don't know if it will be something that's currently used for interim shelter housing, but we're expecting that there will be a host of on-site services that come along with it.
Well, Housing for Health is probably the good agency to be talking to. Their model is different, but there's some similarities there. You probably talk to some folks from HSID as well, if you haven't. And they're more familiar with different types of housing and programs that you might want to model after. Just want to make sure that you're not taking beds that would be going somewhere else or displacing anybody or something like that. But we can get you some names of HSID folks to talk to if you haven't, but Housing for Health is actually a good place to have started.
Sure, and I expect whoever will have submitted proposals, I hope would have thought about displacement concerns for anyone that they already have on site.
When are the responses back?
They're closed and they're scored, and we're just waiting for final recommendations. We're processing an appeal right now, and that should be wrapped up next week.
Okay. Well, I'm curious to hear how it turns out.
Excellent. Thank you all, and thank you so much for your work. And this report, we accept and appreciate the report and look back to hearing from you all in the future as the project grows and develops over time. We sincerely hope that this is a program that can be eliminated, because we won't be financing police forces to give tickets to people that we will then finance and raise money for a program to undo the ticket. Again, in the meantime and in the breach, we truly, truly appreciate your work and the passion and empathy that you all obviously bring to the project. Thank you so much. If there's nothing further, it's very close to 5 o'clock. I believe we're adjourned.
Yes, sir. That
Thank
clears
you.
the desk, sir.